Hello, welcome to the Community Christian Church of Christ in beautiful Richlands, North Carolina. As you look around our facility and our auditorium, it is obvious that the only thing that is missing is you. We do welcome you to our service, to our fellowship. If you would walk through our doors, you would find that there is something here for people of all backgrounds, all ages, and regardless where you are on your journey and your relationship with Jesus, we believe that this is the place for you. We offer education, teaching, and training to help equip and prepare people for the works of ministry. We're also helping you on your journey to get to know Jesus better. We have here a wonderful group of people who will welcome you with a smile, a hug, and a handshake. Again, anytime that you are around the Richlands, North Carolina area, we welcome you to come visit with us. We're going to pick it up in chapter 4. And verse 9. And he is giving a general truth, but he's emphasizing, remember, the book of Ecclesiastes is a call to the assembly. He has come to these conclusions through experimentation, through research, through study. He has reached this moment in his life that he wants to impart this wisdom to the people of Israel. And we would call it common sense in some of the cases, but as we are aware, from time to time we need to be reminded of common sense. And how easy it is for us to get distracted on the materialistic things or the temporary things of this world. In verse 8, he is brought to a personal moment. He asked the question of, why do people, why do kings, why do individuals, entrepreneurs, people with ambition, why do they work so hard to accumulate things? And from time to time, he gets on it, but then it becomes personal, and he reflects, and he even asks the question, why am I doing that? Why am I a part of this madness? So he asked the question in verse 8, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This is also vanity and an unhappy business. The question is, which he keeps coming over this thought, is that naked you come into the world, naked you will go out. You came into this world with nothing, you will go out of this world for nothing. So why is it that we put so much emphasis and the accumulation of things? I think about the drive and the push and the pressure that we put on our children. I once saw an interview with fourth graders. And in the interview, the fourth graders were asked what they considered the most stressful things or the thing they worry about the most. What are they most afraid of? Now, trying to reflect as a fourth grader, I was trying to think to myself, if I were to be asked that question in fourth grade, what am I most afraid of? I may have said the werewolf. I saw a movie once with Michael Landon. I was a teenage werewolf or something like that, and it gave me nightmares. And so I hated werewolves. I hate snakes. So if you would ask me in fourth grade what I'm most afraid of, it'd probably been snakes and werewolves. The number one answer from fourth graders was not being successful in life. That was the number one answer. And I thought when I did that and saw that survey, I thought, how much pressure are we putting on elementary kids to be successful in life? We teach our kids to go to school, get a good education, they get a good job to accumulate money, that they're going to have a nice home. For what reason? To what end? To what purpose? And we just keep competing the same old cycles. And so he asked the question, why am I doing this? Why am I depriving? For whom am I toiling? My children? My kids? Now, Solomon's a wise man. And he says, I'm going to accumulate this, and here's one of two things will either happen in life. Either your kids are going to sell everything you've accumulated because they don't want it. Things that you think were important or interesting, that a value, they don't place any value on that. John in our Sunday school, or our men's group a couple weeks ago, brought up a thing called, I always mispronounce it, Humble?
Hummels.
Say it again.
Hummels?
Hummels?
Yeah, the little
Little figurines. Now we had a factory of that close to my house where I grew up. And my mom had those little figurines. I'm home for Bible college. And she wants to go there because attached to the factory, there was a retail place right out front. And we went there to look at these little figurines, and I went with Mom and Dad to spend the day, and she's looking at these figurines, and I picked up one of those figurines, and I always thought it said humble. And I picked up the bottom and saw the price tag on that thing, and I said, there is nothing humble about this. And I set it back down, and I said, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. Well, she had collected some of those throughout our life, and she had them in what was called a china closet. Any of you have a china closet, little glass cabinet, and periodically, you were never allowed to touch them. You were never allowed to get near them, but every once she would open up and she would clean them out and she'd put them back in there. And she would talk about these things and where she got that. That didn't interest me at all. Now, when my mom and dad passed away, not one of my brothers and I were standing in line saying, I get the Hummel. That's coming to my house. As far as I know, they're still sitting in my brother's house, which he moved to my mom and dad's house. They're still sitting where we left them the day they died. Now, I told him, I said, listen, you don't have to keep them for us. This does not have to be a monument or mortuary that you're living in. So if you want to get rid of them, we don't care. You're not going to hurt me one bit. Now, I don't know if he got rid of them or not. But I can tell you this, I didn't want them. The other thing that happens with the things that you accumulate in life, if your kids don't want them, your kids end up fighting over them. And they won't talk to each other over those things the rest of their life. So Solomon asked the question I think of all of us need to ask. My brother Dale was 78. And he's in real good shape. Went under, until last week, he went under surgery last week, had 4 stents put in his heart. Talked to him the next day, he's doing well. Physically fit, he looks good, he looks well younger than his age. But my niece Lisa called me and she said, Jason, you need to have a talk with Dad. I told him he needs to get his affairs in order just in case something would happen. What are we going to do? I said, Lisa, what do you want that he's got? What do you want? I said, we'll set it up right now. She said, I can't think of anything that he has I want. I said, well, I got all his guns, so I don't care what you do with the rest. Right? He gave them to me a long time ago. They're sitting in my house. So she said, we got to get those affairs in order. I said, well, if those are things that are bothering you. So I think about my mom and dad going through that process. It was hard for me to get around my head that my niece is talking about my brother, but he's 70. I said 78. He's 74. He's 74 years old, right? Well, we got to think about those things. Solomon is asking the question, I'm working so hard. And he still works, by the way. He's retired once and went back to work. And she said, Jason, please help me. Help me. Tell him he needs to just stop. And I said to him, Dio, I said, why are you working so hard? Your son's good. Your daughters are good. They're all married. They got their own homes. You don't need to work, save up. Go enjoy the rest of your life. Go travel. Go see some things. Go do some. What are you depriving yourself for? And Solomon's asking that question. What am I depriving? It's all vanity. This is useless. He's saying I'm depriving myself by accumulating all these things, and who's going to get it anyway? Now he goes to verse 9. He says, 2 are better than 1. It seems like there's a huge transition, but it's not. The emphasis on is the relationships that you build in life. Something that I came across years ago, and I don't know what author that I read it from, but I love it. People are not interested in institutions. People are not interested in buildings. People are interested in people. And sometimes we get all captivated, we get all taken away about the busy things in life, and the main priority in life is, number 1, your relationship with God, and number 2, the relationship with the people around you. So he reminds us the emphasis. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. So I've heard a lot of people say this. I've heard a lot of people say this in my life. I've heard expressed, I'm a self-made man. I don't need anybody. I can go through this life alone until you do. People think that until they do. The problem is if you've cut out everybody out of your life, by the time that you need them, they're not going to be around. And so he's saying you better emphasize the relationships and the fellowships that you bring with other people. If you fall, now here's the question. Are you going to fall in life? Is that an if or is it a when? It's a when. When are you going to fall? When you fall, if you don't have anyone to lift you around, you know, that old commercial, remember that? Help, I've fallen. And I can't get up.
I had a church full.
What's that?
I had a church full.
You had a church?
I had a church full to pick me up.
Oh, you had a church full to pick. Yes, you did. That happened quick. One minute I seen you, next minute I looked over, you got a big old black eye. I was like, what in the world happened to Miss Norma? Now, verse 11. I'm going to read it and talk about, but there is something that I don't know if you're aware of this. I'm going to bring this out a little bit. Again, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Now he's asking the question, how can one keep warm alone? In the Palestinian nights, I've been told by friends that spend some time over there in the military that nights can get very, very cold. And sometimes just having that extra person around you, that body warmth can make all the difference. If two lie down, they can keep warm. I noticed something in my life. My wife and I have changed rules. When we were young, she was always freezing. And I was always hot. And not so much anymore. Now, she is roasted. It's like some nuclear event going over there. That's what I do. Now, I don't know if you know this or not. Do you guys know it's in Samuel that when David got old, they went and found him a young woman to come and lay beside him at night, not to have relations, just to lay beside him at night to keep him warm. And I thought it had to be a bunch of men to do that, because if they were smart, they would have went and got somebody in middle age, and that would have kept him warm, not someone in their early 20s. What's that? You understand what he's dealing with. He's talking about companionship and camaraderie. Friendship. See, sometimes people go through life and they get so focused on the materialistic things and success and ambition that they cut out all the people out of their life. Whether you like him or hate him, love him, or can't stand him, there's a couple statements that Trump has made that I really appreciate. He said, you better be nice to people on your way up because you're going to meet them all again on your way down. That's a great quote. I don't know if he's adhered to it or not. I'm just telling you it's a great quote. Verse 12, and though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So now he's talking about in security, he's talking about in companionship, and now he's talking about in a sense of protection, that two are better than one. Do you know that when Jesus sent out the apostles, he always sent them out in twos? You read the New Testament, when the preachers always went out, they always went in twos. No lone rangers, right? Always in twos. Now, I like that last statement. Solomon threw this in. Two will withstand. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Have you ever seen in weddings the unity candles? Have you guys seen that here? Where they do the 2 candles on the side and bring both the candles. Anything else you've ever seen?
We did pouring of sand.
Pouring of sand. I like that, the two mixing together and becoming one in a vase where you can see it. The last wedding I think I did in Ohio, maybe it wasn't the last, but close to one of the last weddings I did. The couple had a big board there, and they had 3 strands representing her, him, and God. And during that time, they braided those 3 strands as the 2 and God all becoming one. And that is the best image I can give of that verse. And that God is in the midst of that relationship. I think about relationships I've had, earthly, secular relationships outside the church. There are people that I had great relationships with. There are still individuals, if I call, probably pick up right where we left off. But the thing that depresses me about them is I have not won them to Jesus. And so I know that when I meet with them or sit down with them, that I know that our relationship will end this side of heaven if they don't get right with God, and that depresses me. And so what I like, I was thinking, when Tom and Rose, they've been up in Virginia. And I was thinking on the way here tonight, man, I miss seeing them. Can't wait till they get back. And I thought, I'm going to make a new rule that if you go on vacation, you can't go any longer than a week. That's the new rule. Now, you understand, I'm joking, but I like it when we're all together. It's just the way that I am. And so one of the things that appeals to me about heaven is that we get to be with each other forever. And there'll never have to be any separation. Isn't that awesome? And to think of that, no more anxiety, no separation anxiety, that when we have that glorious reunion, we know we'll never have to depart from one another. And so I cannot help but to think that even here in Ecclesiastes 4, Solomon is including in this threefold cord that there's no better relationship than when a relationship has God in the middle. Do you know in Corinthians where it says that a believer should not be bound with an unbeliever? Do you know that could relate more to marriage? And that you should be even careful who you have business dealings with and who you have interactions with. Man, in your friendships, even in friendships, isn't it amazing that you can have great bonds together, sisters and brothers in Christ, and Christ is right there in the middle. That 3-strand, that 3-cord is unbroken. Verse 13. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. If you've ever reached the point where you think you have arrived, you haven't. I always joke with Renee, I love the GPS when I put it on the car, because when it get to wherever I'm going, it says, you have arrived. I said, finally, someone recognizes. Right? I had a gentleman tell me one time, didn't tell me directly, told my brother. And they were discussing an issue, and this individual believed he reached spiritual perfection. And he told my brother, you're just not on the same plateau that I have arrived upon. Now look at this text. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. There are some people that they just have some success in areas and they think they know everything about everything. And what he's saying is that in this wisdom, and that no matter what statue or what position you have arrived to on this earth, you are always a student, at least you should be, and willing to learn. I've found that if you're just open your ears and you listen, you can learn from everybody. You don't have a handle on everything. You may have been around, you may have experiences, but there's always room to learn, is there not? And so he's talking about a king or a politician or ruler or an emperor, however you want to look at it, a CEO, who think they know everything and they can't be taught anything. Sometimes people need to take some advice. Maybe you need to take some advice. Maybe I need to take some advice. For he went from prison to the throne through his own kingdom. He had been poor. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who came later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and striving after the wind. So now he's really going to the rulers, the leaders, the successful people in life. And they are what we call, they might call themselves a self-made individual. This is a person who's picked themselves up by the bootstraps. You ever heard that terminology here in Richlands, North Carolina? They picked themselves up. And I love that. I love to see people better themselves in life. I love to see people bring themselves up from the pit to the castle, right? From the outhouse to the schoolhouse to the White House. I love that. J.D. Vance is a great example of that. Born in Ohio. Do any of you know the history of J.D. Vance? If you don't, you ought to look where that man came from. One of my favorite presidents was actually a man that really took a lot of slack. Timing is everything, and he became president at the wrong time, old Herbert Hoover. And what people don't know about Herbert Hoover, he was an orphan. And he was broke. He had nothing. And that man worked himself extremely hard and achieved the president of the United States. He really was the working man's president. It just so happened when he became president, the stock market went... But you ought to study his history and see what he did for the working man. It's amazing what he did. And he, like this account, pulled himself up from poverty. Now, he didn't pull himself out of prison, but the analogy is this is a king that worked hard. He pulled himself up. He did good things. But in verse 16, there was no end of all the people of whom he led. Yet those who came later will not rejoice in him. Why? Because you are soon forgotten. While you're living, you think you're making a name. The number one thing that men strive for is leaving a legacy. Some reminder that they were here on the earth at all. But I can take you to countless cemeteries down rows and rows and rows, and you don't have a clue who that individual is. Surely, and by the way, kings are no exceptions. There's probably about 15 throughout world history that you might recognize if I said their name. But for the most part, even the great kings of the world have all been forgotten. They are dust. I find it interesting. Miss Helen, the ladies are working on assignment tomorrow on Samaria. And to take a look at Samaria, it was built upon kingdom after kingdom after kingdom. And one foundation of another, and they were all forgotten. And that's his point. You're working and you're striving after materialistic things, after ambition, to make your name for yourself, and at the end of it, you're forgotten. So what he's reminding us, the assembly, is you better focus on the deeper, more meaningful things of life. Verse 1, chapter 5. Now, what time we got?
7:30.
When we look at this section, a lot of this concept is hard for us to relate to because of what Christ has done for us. Your concepts of God are greatly different from the concepts of God and how approachable God is. It's different from the Old Testament. And that God was unapproachable. Really, on an individualistic basis, you could not come into the presence of God. There was more of this wrath, this fear of God and the holiness of God because of your imperfection. But Christ has softened that. We meet, every one of us. You pray on your own. You pray in your car. You pray when you sit down at meals. And you begin that prayer something along these lines. Our Father who art in heaven. Do you realize that was foreign to the Old Testament Jew? It was Jesus who came along in Matthew who said, when you pray, pray in this way. He taught them the pattern of prayer, the model prayer. When you pray, pray in this way, Our Father who art in heaven. That would have blown their minds to consider God as, or to approach him as Father. Now he balances out by saying, Our Father who art in heaven, holy or hallowed be thy name. So there's the praise. So he balances it out. And understand that there's a reverence and there's a respect as we come into the presence of God. And maybe we have softened it so much that we no longer have a reverence when we come into the presence of God. So as a reminder tonight, let me say this. Not one of us, not me, not the guys up in the sound roof, not one of our elders, none of you. None of you have the right to come into the presence of God without the blood of Jesus that's covered you. You can't stand in the presence of the all-holy God in an unholy manner. But His imputed righteousness has given us access into the Holy of Holies. And so we go there with great boldness. And we no longer come with fear and trembling into the presence of God because it was softened by Jesus. However, there still needs to be a respect of who and what God is. So let's take a look at this. Chapter 5, verse 1. Guard your steps. Now, what's that mean? Doing. Be careful, cautious, think. So, I can tell you this. I hate wearing shoes. So I'm just telling you, if you ever come here and surprise me at church, you're going to find me walking around bare feet. I'm a hillbilly. I'll take it. It is what it is. When I went to school, it was the hardest thing to wear shoes all day. I come home, shoes were off. And so I like walking around my bare feet. In Ohio, man, never wear shoes. Out in the grass, out in the yard, wherever I went, no shoes. You cannot do that here. You have a thing called fire ants. And those are not of God. I'm telling you, the devil made those things. You also have different snakes down here than we have up there. And when I go outside here, I'm always looking down. Good practice. It is. Even at the church building. We went out one Sunday, there was a big old snake out the back door. Now when I walk out that back door, I look in there, there's a gap on that, what is that little tool shed back there? There's a gap under that door. If I ever open that door, I'm just like... We go down in the shed. The very first week I'm here, we have a cleaning day, and we're down in the shed with Mr. Gator. And Mr. Gator, I was talking about snakes. He said, snakes, you got to watch out for spiders. I said, a spider? You just step on an old spider. He said, yeah, but you can get black widows. I'm like, what? And brown, say that again? We don't have them in Ohio. We have snow. We get ladybugs, and we get stink bugs. And they stink. But I don't worry, half them things bite me and making my arms swell all up. And we got ticks. You got ticks here too, right? Right. So there you go. But I'm telling you, I walk outside here, I'm like this. And if the grass is a little bit high, I'm really watching it. So it means that you have a presence of where you're at in your surroundings. I get on Renee all the time. We go to the store, I was like, Renee, you are never watching your surroundings. These people are crazy. When you're walking to your car, look what's around you. Who's parked beside you? Is the car parked too close? Why are you parked here? How do you got your purse? I'm always trying to... She's like, stop it, you're not my dad. I said, I know I'm not your dad, but I love you, and I'm trying to watch over you. You got to watch where you're at. But we very seldom think about watching our steps as we come into the presence of God. Guard your steps. When you go to the house of God, to draw near to listen is better than to offer sacrifices of fools. See, here it is. God don't want you going through the motions. He don't want your ritualism. Can I just share with you? It's always been a pet peeve of me ever since I've been little. I don't like churchiness, and I don't like the falsity that I've seen in church throughout my life. In my mind, either you're in or you're out. Pick one. And if you're in, don't be all the way in. Don't straddle the fence. Don't straddle the line. If you're going to be in, be in. And be, to use a modern day terminology, be real. Don't be false. Don't be fake. Don't put on a facade. He says to guard yourself when you go to the house of God, to draw near, to listen. To listen. We have this phrase, I don't know where it come from. I think it was a YouTube. In our house, listen, Linda. Listen. You guys ever heard that? What is that a YouTube clip or something? TikTok? Listen, Linda. So sometimes I'll say that, to the kids or the granddaughter. Listen, Linda. Listen. Pay attention to what I'm trying to tell you. And there are times, They're looking at you, but they are not present. My friend Scott one time took his son, his son kept turning away. He said, look at me. And he would turn away. So finally, he grabbed his head. I'm not hard, he just gently. He grabbed his head and said, look at me. And his son went with his eyes. And he said, JT, look at me. Now he wants him to look at him for what reason? Now it's funny, we're saying look at me, but what he really wants him to hear. But he wants his undivided attention. As a parent, have you ever wanted that from your children? Now, I'm going to tell you something. As your Father in heaven, He wants it from you. He doesn't want your lip service. He just doesn't want your outward shell. He wants you present. He wants you present in the music. He wants you present in the prayer. He wants you present in the communion. He wants you present in the assembly. When you come to the house of God, guard your steps. To draw near to listen is better than to offer sacrifice of fools. In other words, He doesn't just want your offering. He just doesn't want your outward motions. He wants you. For they do not know that they are doing evil. Be not rash with your mouth. Now, we touched on this a couple weeks ago. And I'll just remind you one more time. Be careful what you promise God. That's all I want to say. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few. For a dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice with many words. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for He has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and to destroy the work of your hands? For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. But God is the one you must fear. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. Now, I know a couple weeks ago we went over this, but I thought it was important just to touch on it again before we go into the next chapter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and yet there are higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. When good increases, they increase who eat them. And whatever advantage has their owner, but to see them with his eyes. Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. I watched this movie with Russell Crowe one time based on a true life story of a boxer called Cinderella Man. One of my favorite movies. When we watched that, my dad was still living. He said he remembered listening to that fight on the radio. It's hard to believe that was, that Dad was there present at that. He'd have been 100. My mom would have been 92 today, 92. But he listened to that fight, and the guy that he fought was a man by the name of Max Baer. His son played Jethro on the Beverly Hillbillies. But there's a scene in that movie where Russell Crowe character, as the boxer, he's dressed up in a tuxedo and he's out on the town with his wife. It's a beautiful image, just a wonderful night with his wife, a romantic night, and they're kind of having just one of those nights that you have as a couple that you kind of dream about. Well, that's what it was. It was a dream. And the next day he wakes up and he's in this little kids are hungry and there's one piece of ham. And he takes the piece of ham that's put on his plate before he goes out to work. His little girl is starving, so he takes that one piece of ham off of his plate and puts it over there and said, I had a dream last night and I ate a steak this big and it was so real that I'm not even hungry today. You have that piece of ham. Later on in the movie, when he's fighting for thousands of dollars, they asked him what he was fighting for. Have you ever seen the movie? Do you remember what he said? Milk. He said, that's what I'm fighting for. That my kids can have milk. Now, what was interesting to me is that man worked at the docks during the day and prize fight at night. He had nothing to eat, no money. He was starving, but when he come home and hit the bed, he was out. But it says that the wealthy man comes home and he cannot sleep. You know why? Proverbs says he lays there all night scheming how he can get the money out of your pocket. And this is what Solomon wrote in the Proverbs. He lays there all night and sleep will not come to him because he can't stand when he's got $1 million, but you've got $2 little in your pocket and he can't figure out how to get the two out of your pocket into his. And so it says he lays there all night scheming, and in the next morning he carries out his plan. Boy, things really haven't changed that much in 3,000 years, have they? See, you're about your life every day. You don't think that way. Every day of your life, you're just trying to put food on the table, clothes on the back, and a roof over your head. You're trying to worship your Lord, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And because of the innocence of your character, you don't realize that there are people out there who do not sleep. They cannot sleep because you have one thing that they can't have or don't have, and they won't rest. It's hard to get your mind that there are people like that. All you want to do is survive and come home and get a good night's sleep, but they can't even have that. Wow. He who loves money, verse 10, will not be satisfied with money. The question is, how much is enough? And when will you know when you've got it? Verse 12 will wrap it up. Sweet is the sleep of the laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. If I could quote our president one more time. Direct quote. Money does not make or does not bring happiness. Direct quote. He said it can make things in life easier, but it does not bring happiness. In fact, for many, it's just the opposite. It didn't bring joy. It didn't bring peace. It brought much grief. I think of the individuals who may still be living today. I think of individuals, Whitney Houston. Again, say about her what you want, but the woman had a voice like an angel. Learned to sing in church. Her daddy was a preacher. Her mama was a gospel singer, one of the best gospel singers of all time. She left the church industry and the music industry. And by the way, she's not the only one. There are numerous individuals who became extremely wealthy who started singing in their church, but they were led away from the church to the secular industry for riches, fame, and fortune, and it brought them to an early grave. Now that can happen in the music industry, the sports industry, the entertainment industry, the business industry, you name it. That when you get your mind on wealth and cannot stop until you get wealth, it ultimately brings people to their own hurt. So why do we all strive for it? It's just an interesting question. We think somehow that these things are going to bring us more joy. Temporary maybe, but not everlasting. Remember, it's a call to the assembly to keep our minds on the things of God and not the things of this world. Our Father and our God in heaven, we thank you so much for the wisdom of Solomon, and that we can open up this book tonight and be reminded, encouraged, exhorted, rebuked, refreshed. We thank you for this holy word. In Jesus' name, amen.